A wealthy millionaire thought his life was secure, until the unthinkable happened. His only son nearly drowned in front of dozens of people, and not one of them moved. But then, out of the shadows, came the janitor's daughter. What she did that day would not only save his son's life, but also unravel secrets, ignite rivalries, and change the fate of two families forever. Stay with me, this story will break your heart and open your eyes. This is not just a story. It's a piece of someone's hidden pain quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada? The US, Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. The city of Everwood was known for its glass towers that scraped the heavens, for its perfectly polished streets where the wealthy strolled without ever looking down. Yet, beneath those towers lay another world. The world of those who cleaned, mopped, and silently carried the weight of other people's lives. It was in this silent world that Rosa, the janitor's daughter, grew up. Her father scrubbed the marble floors of the prestigious Greenwood Academy, a school where only the richest children could attend. Rosa, though poor, lived in the shadows of privilege, catching glimpses of a world she was never meant to belong to. But fate has strange ways of shattering boundaries. One summer afternoon, when the sun shimmered over the academy's private pool, an event unfolded that would change the lives of two families forever. The millionaire's son, Ethan Caldwell, heir to Caldwell Enterprises, would nearly drown before the eyes of his peers. And when the desperate gasps of others failed to move them into action, it was Rosa, the janitor's daughter, who dove headfirst into the depths. Neither Ethan nor Rosa knew that this single act of courage would uncover secrets buried deep beneath family pride, wealth, and pain. And as the waters stilled that day, so began a story of redemption, betrayal, and an unlikely bond strong enough to defy everything. Greenwood Academy was the kind of place that sparkled even in the rain. Its Gothic arches blended seamlessly with modern glass, like a fortress for the privileged. To the children of the city's elite, it was not just a school. It was a kingdom, one where money ruled and power was inherited like an heirloom. Ethan Caldwell walked its hallways with a natural arrogance. At 16, he was handsome, tall, and already bore the sharp features of his father, Richard Caldwell, the steel-eyed millionaire who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Ethan was used to being admired, envied, even obeyed. But he was also used to being lonely. Rosa, meanwhile, lived in the shadows of the academy. She was allowed to attend classes only because her father, Daniel, worked as the school's janitor, cleaning up the very messes of children who mocked her existence. She wore second-hand uniforms, her shoes scuffed, her books donated from last year's students. She moved quietly, invisibly, until her sharp wit or unexpected courage occasionally betrayed her presence. Ethan noticed her sometimes. Not enough to admit it to his friends, but enough that her silence unnerved him. He couldn't decide if it was disdain or strength in her eyes. And he didn't like that she never bowed the way others did. But on that hot June day, as the academy's pool party swelled with laughter and splashes, the invisible girl and the untouchable boy were about to collide in a way neither expected. As Ethan climbed the diving board, daring his friends with a cocky grin, no one knew that within minutes his life would depend on the girl they all ignored. The air smelled of chlorine and sunscreen. Ethan stood on the highest board, his friends egging him on. "Do a double flip," one shouted. "Bet you can't," another laughed. Ethan smirked, pride swelling in his chest. He lipped, twisting midair, but the dive went wrong. His body slammed awkwardly against the surface, and he sank deeper than expected. At first, laughter echoed around the pool. But seconds passed, then more. Ethan didn't come back up. Panic flickered across the surface. His friends froze, each waiting for someone else to move. No one wanted to be the first to admit fear. Rosa, carrying a mop and bucket near the edge, froze as well. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The world seemed to blur. The laughter, the screams, the frozen faces. And then instinct overpowered hesitation. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bucket, and dove. The water closed around her, icy and heavy. Through the shimmering blue, she saw Ethan sinking, arms flailing weakly, eyes wide with shock and terror. She grabbed him, pulling his heavy body upward, lungs burning with effort. When they broke the surface, Ethan coughed violently. Rosa gasped for air, dragging him to the edge where others finally reached down to help. The pool deck was chaos, gasps, shouts, whispers. Ethan lay trembling, water spilling from his lips, his eyes locking onto Rosa's. For the first time in his life, the millionaire's son looked at the janitor's daughter with something other than indifference. As Ethan's father arrived moments later, his fury not at his son's carelessness but at Rosa's very presence would ignite a storm no one could contain. The crowd around the pool grew restless. Teachers rushed in, students whispered, and cell phones recorded everything in shaky, eager hands. But the only two people who seemed truly aware of the gravity of the moment were Ethan and Rosa. Ethan sat propped against the cool tiles, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, his lips trembling with shock. Every breath felt heavier than the last, water still lodged in his chest. His friends hovered nearby, their voices nervous and shallow. Man, that was crazy. You almost died, dude.
You should have seen Rosa. She just...
But Ethan didn't hear them. His gaze was fixed on the girl sitting a few feet away, her uniform soaked, her braid dripping onto her shoulders, her arms trembling from the effort of pulling him out. Rosa was staring at the ground, avoiding his eyes, as though ashamed of the attention. Daniel, Rosa's father, pushed through the crowd, panic etched into his face.
Rosa, are you all right?
He knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders, his old hands trembling. She nodded quickly, brushing it off. I'm fine, Papa. He just needed help. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, to thank her, but the words stuck in his throat. Gratitude was something foreign to him. He was used to commanding, demanding, or dismissing. How did you thank someone who just saved your life? The murmurs hushed when Richard Caldwell entered. His presence was like a blade cutting through silk, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. He was a tall man, his suit immaculate even in the summer heat, his eyes as cold as steel. He rushed straight to his son, crouching beside him, scanning him with an expression that was more frustration than relief. What happened? He demanded. Ethan stammered, his voice still shaky. I slipped. I couldn't. Before he could finish, Richard's gaze shifted to Rosa. His expression hardened. You. The word was heavy with disdain. Why were you even near the pool? This isn't your place. Rosa shrank under his glare, her voice small but steady. He was drowning.
You just what?
Richard snapped. You should have fetched an adult. What if you failed? What if you made it worse? His voice echoed off the pool walls, slicing through the stunned silence. Daniel stepped forward, his jaw tight. With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, my daughter saved your son's life. You should be thanking her, not... Enough. Richard cut in, his voice like thunder. You work here to clean floors, not to tell me how to raise my son? And she, he pointed a finger at Rosa, should learn her place. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Ethan's stomach twisted. For the first time in his life, he felt ashamed of his father. He glanced at Rosa, who bit her lip so hard it almost bled. Her eyes glistened, but she held her tears back with a strength that unsettled him. Ethan finally found his voice. Father, stop. His words were shaky, but they silenced the air. Richard turned to him sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. Ethan had never spoken against him before. She saved me. Ethan continued, his chest heaving. If it weren't for her, I'd be dead. The words hung there, raw and undeniable. Rosa's eyes flicked to his, wide with surprise. Daniel's hand tightened protectively on her shoulder, and Richard Caldwell, a man who had built empires and crushed competitors, stood speechless for a moment, his authority cracked by the trembling voice of his own son. But Richard's silence was not surrender. That night, behind closed doors, he would begin to plot a way to erase Rosa from Ethan's life entirely, unaware that the bond between the janitor's daughter and his heir had already begun to take root. The evening sky over Everwood turned violet, streaked with the last threads of dying sunlight. From the towering windows of the Caldwell mansion, the city below looked like a glittering sea, but inside the air was anything but serene. Richard Caldwell sat in his leather chair, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, his face hardened into a mask of silent fury. The chandelier's golden light reflected in his eyes, cold and unyielding. Across from him, Ethan sat with his shoulders hunched, his hair still damp from the pool, a quiet rebellion simmering inside him. Richard finally spoke, his voice measured, almost too calm. Do you realize what you've done today? Ethan's hands clenched on his knees. I nearly drowned. If Rosa hadn't. Stop. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. Do not say her name in this house. Ethan's chest tightened. She saved my life. Why are you acting like she's the problem? Richard slammed his glass onto the table, the sound echoing through the cavernous room.
Because she is the problem.
That girl, she doesn't belong in our world. You don't see it now, but people like her, they take advantage. They cling to weakness, waiting for an opportunity to step into lives that aren't theirs. Ethan's face burned with anger. You didn't see her father. She didn't think, she didn't hesitate. She didn't care who I was. She just jumped. No one else moved. None of my friends, not even the teachers. But she did. Richard leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Exactly. And now she'll expect something in return. Gratitude, favors, maybe even a place beside you. That is how the poor operate, feeding on the pride of the wealthy. Ethan's voice cracked, part fury, part hurt. Is that what you think of everyone? That people only act out of selfishness? That kindness doesn't exist? Richard stood abruptly, his towering figure casting a shadow over his son. Kindness is a mask, Ethan. You'll learn this when you grow into the empire you're meant to lead, and you will not waste your future entangled with a janitor's daughter. The words hit Ethan like a blow. For the first time, he truly saw the chasm between his father's world and his own heart. A world of glass walls and golden chains. Meanwhile, across town, Rosa sat in her small apartment, drying her hair with a worn towel. The room smelled faintly of detergent and dust, the television humming softly in the corner. Her father, Daniel, was pacing, muttering under his breath. Ungrateful man, Daniel seethed. You risked your life for his son, and instead of thanking you, he humiliated you in front of everyone. His hands trembled with restrained fury. Rosa looked at him, her eyes tired but calm. It doesn't matter, Papa. Ethan's safe. That's what matters. Daniel stopped, staring at her. There was something in her voice, a quiet strength, a compassion that reminded him of Rosa's late mother. He sighed heavily and sank into a chair. It matters to me. You deserve better than to be treated like dirt. Rosa smiled faintly, though her chest ached. Maybe. But I don't need his father's approval. I only did what was right. Yet as she lay in bed that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, Rosa couldn't stop replaying the look in Ethan's eyes. The raw gratitude, the unspoken words. She had seen something vulnerable there, something that didn't match his arrogant facade. Something that made her wonder if their worlds were as far apart as they seemed. Back at the mansion, Ethan stood at his bedroom window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. His father's words echoed in his mind, bitter and heavy. But louder still was the memory of Rosa's arms pulling him from the water, the fire in her eyes as she refused to bow before Richard Caldwell's wrath. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt torn. Between the empire he was born into and the truth he was beginning to see. And as he closed his eyes, one thought refused to leave him: he needed to see Rosa again. No matter the cost, no matter the danger of defying his father. The next morning at Greenwood Academy, whispers followed Ethan like shadows. His near drowning had spread across the school like wildfire, each retelling more exaggerated than the last. Some claimed he had been unconscious for minutes, others that Rosa had performed some heroic act of resuscitation on the poolside tiles. But the one truth buried beneath all the rumors was simple: Rosa had saved him. Ethan's friends clustered around him, eager to turn the incident into a joke. Man, you owe her big time, one said with a laugh. Careful, Ethan, another teased, nudging him. The janitor's daughter might expect a date in return. Their laughter cut into him like knives, but Ethan forced a smirk, hiding the churn of emotions beneath his polished exterior. Inside, though, he burned with shame. They could mock Rosa all they wanted, but none of them had moved a muscle when he was drowning. Not one. Only she had acted. By midday, Ethan slipped away from his friends, his mind set on one thing: finding Rosa. He finally spotted her in the courtyard, sitting alone beneath the shade of an old oak tree. A book rested in her lap, though her eyes weren't on the pages. Instead, she stared into the distance, her expression unreadable. Ethan's heart pounded. He wasn't used to approaching anyone without confidence, but Rosa unsettled him. She had seen him at his weakest, dragged him from death itself. How could he stand before her now? He drew a shaky breath and walked closer. Rosa. Or she looked up, startled, then quickly lowered her eyes back to the book. You shouldn't be here. I had to thank you, Ethan said quietly, for saving me. Rosa closed the book, her fingers tightening on its cover. I didn't do it for thanks. You were drowning. Anyone would have. Ethan shook his head, his voice raw. No. That's the thing. No one else did. They all just stood there. If it weren't for you, I'd... His throat tightened, the memory clawing at him. I'd be gone. Her gaze softened then, but only for a moment. Your father doesn't want you talking to me. If he sees us, I don't care what he wants. Ethan interrupted, anger flaring in his chest. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know what you did, what it meant. Rosa sighed, brushing a strand of damp hair from her forehead. He knows. He just doesn't care. The words stung more than Ethan expected. He lowered his voice, almost pleading. Then let me care. Let me at least thank you in my own way. Please. Rosa studied him, her dark eyes searching his face for sincerity. For a fleeting second, she saw not the arrogant hair of Caldwell Enterprises, but a boy, trembling, broken, desperate to be understood. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. But Ethan shook his head firmly. I owe you everything. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Rosa felt her resolve wavering. She wanted to push him away, to remind him that their worlds were too far apart, that nothing good could come of this fragile connection. But the way he looked at her, raw, vulnerable, stripped of pride, made it impossible. Just, she said finally, her voice trembling, don't make this harder than it already is. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp voice cut through the courtyard. Ethan? He froze. Standing at the far end of the courtyard was one of his father's associates, a stern-faced man who managed the academy's financial dealings. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Ethan and Rosa together. Rosa quickly rose, clutching her book to her chest. Ethan's pulse thundered. He knew what this meant. If word reached his father, Rosa would be punished, maybe even expelled from Greenwood altogether. As Rosa walked swiftly away, Ethan realized something terrifying. His father's power wasn't just a shadow over him, it was a noose tightening around Rosa's life. And if he didn't fight back, she would pay the price for saving him. That night, the Caldwell mansion was quieter than usual. The corridors, gilded with portraits of stern ancestors, seemed to listen to every footstep. Ethan sat in his room, staring at his phone, scrolling through messages from friends that mocked him again. Not about nearly drowning, but about Rosa. Hero boy and his janitor girlfriend. Careful, Ethan, don't catch the cleaning bug. Each word ignited his anger, but what shook him most was the truth beneath the taunts. Everyone had seen him speaking to Rosa. His father would know soon, if he didn't already, and then the knock came. The door swung open without waiting for an answer. Richard Caldwell entered not alone. Beside him stood Mr. Sterling, the Academy's financial manager, the same man who had seen Ethan and Rosa in the courtyard. His presence made Ethan's chest tighten. Richard's voice was smooth, but Ethan recognized the storm beneath it. I hear you've been entertaining interesting company. Ethan's fists clenched. If you mean Rosa, don't say her name, Richard snapped, his composure cracking. He turned to Sterling. Tell him. Sterling adjusted his glasses, his voice flat, bureaucratic. The girl's presence at Greenwood is a privilege, Caldwell, only because of her father's work. One complaint from you, and both she and her father can be dismissed immediately. Ethan's blood ran cold. What? You'd throw her out because of me? Richard's gaze cut into him like a knife. Because of her. She's already a distraction. Do you want gossip to stain our name? Do you want her leeching onto your life, dragging you down into the gutter her family belongs to? Ethan rose from his chair, trembling.
She's not a leech. She saved me.
His voice cracked, emotion spilling over. None of you did. None of my so-called friends did. She was the only one brave enough to jump in. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Richard's voice dropped, quiet but lethal. That girl has already taken too much space in your thoughts. Consider this your warning. If you continue to see her, if you even speak to her again, she and her father will be gone. Homeless. Do you understand me? Ethan felt the floor shift beneath him. His father wasn't threatening just him. He was using Rosa's life, her father's livelihood as leverage. Why? Ethan's voice broke. Why are you so afraid of her? Richard's eyes hardened. Because people like her remind you that you're weak. And weakness, Ethan, is something this family cannot afford. With that, Richard turned and left, Sterling following. The heavy door shut with a finality that pressed against Ethan's chest like a weight. He sank back into his chair, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. The room felt suffocating, the city lights outside mocking him with their endless glow. For the first time, he understood the extent of his father's cruelty. Richard Caldwell wasn't just trying to control him, he was willing to destroy innocent lives to do it. Meanwhile, in their small apartment, Rosa sat by the window, her knees pulled to her chest. Her father had already gone to bed, exhausted from a long day of work, but Rosa couldn't sleep. Her thoughts swirled with Ethan's face in the courtyard, his desperation, the way he had looked at her as if she mattered. She wanted to believe it, but fear not at her. She knew men like Richard Caldwell. Powerful, merciless. She had seen the look in his eyes by the pool. If he wanted her gone, she and her father would lose everything. Rosa pressed her forehead against the cool glass, whispering to herself, "Don't get close. Don't let him pull you in." But her heart betrayed her, because deep down she knew she already was. And as midnight settled over Everwood, Ethan made a silent vow. If his father wanted to erase Rosa from his life, he would have to defy him in ways he never dared before. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell was ready to fight back. That night, the Caldwell mansion was quieter than usual. The corridors, gilded with portraits of stern ancestors, seemed to listen to every footstep. Ethan sat in his room, staring at his phone, scrolling through messages from friends that mocked him again. Not about nearly drowning, but about Rosa, hero boy and his janitor girlfriend. Careful, Ethan, don't catch the cleaning bug. Each word ignited his anger, but what shook him most was the truth beneath the taunts. Everyone had seen him speaking to Rosa. His father would know soon, if he didn't already. And then the knock came. The door swung open without waiting for an answer. Richard Caldwell entered not alone. Beside him stood Mr. Sterling, the Academy's financial manager, the same man who had seen Ethan and Rosa in the courtyard. His presence made Ethan's chest tighten. Richard's voice was smooth, but Ethan recognized the storm beneath it. I hear you've been entertaining interesting company. Ethan's fists clenched. If you mean Rosa. Don't say her name, Richard snapped, his composure cracking. He turned to Sterling. Tell him. Sterling adjusted his glasses, his voice flat, bureaucratic. The girl's presence at Greenwood is a privilege, Caldwell. Only because of her father's work. One complaint from you, and both she and her father can be dismissed immediately. Ethan's blood ran cold. What? You'd throw her out because of me? Richard's gaze cut into him like a knife. Because of her. She's already a distraction. Do you want gossip to stain our name? Do you want her leeching onto your life, dragging you down into the gutter her family belongs to? Ethan rose from his chair, trembling.
She's not a leech. She saved me.
His voice cracked, emotion spilling over. None of you did. None of my so-called friends did. She was the only one brave enough to jump in. If for a moment, silence stretched. Then Richard's voice dropped, quiet but lethal. That girl has already taken too much space in your thoughts. Consider this your warning. If you continue to see her, if you even speak to her again, she and her father will be gone. Homeless. Do you understand me? Ethan felt the floor shift beneath him. His father wasn't threatening just him. He was using Rosa's life, her father's livelihood, as leverage. Why? Ethan's voice broke. Why are you so afraid of her? Richard's eyes hardened. Because people like her remind you that you're weak. And weakness, Ethan, is something this family cannot afford. With that, Richard turned and left, Sterling following. The heavy door shut with a finality that pressed against Ethan's chest like a weight. He sank back into his chair, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. The room felt suffocating. The city lights outside mocking him with their endless glow. For the first time, he understood the extent of his father's cruelty. Richard Caldwell wasn't just trying to control him, he was willing to destroy innocent lives to do it. Meanwhile, in their small apartment, Rosa sat by the window, her knees pulled to her chest. Her father had already gone to bed, exhausted from a long day of work, but Rosa couldn't sleep. Her thoughts swirled with Ethan's face in the courtyard, his desperation, the way he had looked at her as if she mattered. She wanted to believe it, but fear gnawed at her. She knew men like Richard Caldwell, powerful, merciless. She had seen the look in his eyes by the pool. If he wanted her gone, she and her father would lose everything. Rosa pressed her forehead against the cool glass, whispering to herself, "Don't get close. Don't let him pull you in." But her heart betrayed her, because deep down she knew she already was. And as midnight settled over Everwood, Ethan made a silent vow. If his father wanted to erase Rosa from his life, he would have to defy him in ways he never dared before. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell was ready to fight back. Daniel's voice carried a tremor that Rosa hadn't heard in years, not since her mother's funeral. His call ripped through the courtyard, slicing the fragile moment she and Ethan had just shared. Rosa shot to her feet, slipping the pendant into her pocket as guilt flushed through her chest. Ethan turned, his heart pounding, but what unsettled him most wasn't Daniel's anger. It was the fear written across the old man's face. "Papa," Rosa began, but Daniel silenced her with a raised hand. His eyes, dark and stormy, locked on Ethan. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said sharply. His voice wasn't cruel, but it was heavy, worn, almost pleading. "Do you understand what your father has done?" Ethan stepped forward, confusion knitting his brow. "What do you mean?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "This morning, I was called to the headmaster's office. They said my work here was no longer needed." His voice cracked raw. "Effective immediately. After 10 years of service, after every late night and broken back, I'm being cast aside like trash." Rosa gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "What? Why?" Daniel's gaze shifted toward Ethan, his expression pained but unyielding. "Because of this. Because you can't stay away. Because your father won't allow his son to be seen near my daughter. That man would rather see us starving in the streets than let you speak to her again." Ethan's stomach dropped, cold fury rising in his chest. "He can't do that. He doesn't have the right." Daniel let out a bitter laugh, low and hollow. "Your father has every right in this world. Money buys rights. Money buys power. And men like me, we have no defense against it." Rosa clutched her father's arm, her eyes brimming with tears. "We'll find another job, Papa. We'll be okay." But Ethan couldn't stand the despair in her voice. His throat burned as he forced the words out. "I'll fix this. I'll talk to him." Daniel's eyes blazed with anger. "No, you'll make it worse. Don't you see, boy? He doesn't care about you, not really. You're his heir, his pawn, his reflection. And right now, you're tainted. If you keep fighting him, he'll crush you too." But the truth of it struck Ethan like a blade, but he refused to bend. His fist shook at his sides, his voice trembling. "Then let him try. I won't let him destroy you. Either of you." Daniel shook his head, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "Ethan, you're a good boy, but you don't understand the kind of monster your father is." He glanced at Rosa, his voice softening. "Come, Rosa, we're leaving." Rosa hesitated, her eyes darting between her father and Ethan. Her heart ached with the weight of impossible choices. Every instinct screamed at her to follow her father, to protect what little they still had. But Ethan's gaze held her captive, a mixture of pain, gratitude, and unspoken promises. As Daniel pulled her gently away, Rosa whispered, almost too softly for Ethan to hear, "Don't come after me." Her words shattered him. Because even though she was trying to protect him, every syllable dripped with longing, with the cruel truth that she wanted him to come after her anyway. Ethan stood frozen in the courtyard, his chest rising and falling like waves in a storm. His father had drawn the line. Rosa and her father were out. Their world was collapsing, all because she had saved him. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt the spark of something unfamiliar but unshakable, defiance not born of pride but of love. That night, as the janitor and his daughter packed their few belongings in silence, Ethan Caldwell made a vow. If his father thought he could erase Rosa from his world, he had gravely underestimated his own son. For Ethan was ready to risk everything, even his inheritance, to fight for her. The days after the incident stretched out like a fog. In the polished halls of Whitmore Industries, whispers clung to the air like cobwebs. Everyone had heard pieces of the story. How the millionaire's son had nearly drowned in the estate's lake, and how a janitor's daughter had pulled him back from death's grip. But the narrative, like a fractured mirror, reflected differently depending on who was telling it. For Liam, the silence was unbearable. He found himself replaying the moment over and over, the weight of the water pressing against his chest, the helplessness as he thrashed, and then, the small, determined arms that had dragged him up. Clara's face haunted him not with fear, but with gratitude so fierce it felt like a burden. He owed her his life, and yet, within the house, her presence had become fragile, almost ghost-like. Mr. Whitmore had spoken to her only once since that night. It was brief, a polite thank you delivered with all the warmth of a handshake in winter. Afterward, he had ordered the staff to maintain discretion about what had happened. No news was to leave the estate. No reporters were to know. To the outside world, Liam had simply fallen ill for a short time. Clara, though, carried the weight differently. She did not seek attention, nor did she ask for gratitude. But she felt the chill in every glance, the subtle tension in the corridors, the sense that her very existence disrupted the fragile balance of the household. Where once she had walked confidently beside her father, helping with small tasks, now she kept to herself, as though her very footsteps might stir disapproval. Her father noticed. Daniel, the janitor, tried to reassure her in his quiet, steady way. "You did the right thing, Clara. Don't let anyone make you feel small for it." But Clara wasn't sure if she felt small, or simply invisible. One evening, Liam found her sitting on the stone steps by the old greenhouse, her shoulders hunched against the cool air. He hesitated before approaching, guilt pressing heavily on him. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly. Clara looked up, startled. Then, with a small smile, she shook her head. "And yet, here I am." Liam sat beside her, silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Finally, he whispered, "I remember everything. The water, the fear, and you. You saved me, Clara. You didn't just save my life. You gave me back a chance at one." Her eyes glistened, but she quickly looked away. "You don't owe me anything, Liam. I only did what anyone would have done." "That's not true," he said firmly. "No one else was there. No one else could have. It was you. Only you." Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "Then why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Do I feel like I've done something wrong?" The question broke him. Because he knew the answer. It wasn't her. It was his father. His father's pride. His father's fear of the story tarnishing their perfect image. Liam wanted to scream at the injustice of it, but instead, he promised himself something quietly. Fiercely, Clara would not be erased. Later that night, he overheard his father speaking on the phone. "It's simple," Mr. Whitmore said curtly. "We cannot allow a janitor's daughter to be the center of this narrative. My son's reputation, his future, these are what matter." Liam's heart hardened. For the first time, he felt something shift inside him, a defiance he had never known before. His father might command an empire, but he would not command his gratitude, nor his truth. As the moonlight fell across his window, Liam whispered into the night, "I'll tell the world what she did. Even if it means standing against you, Father." The stage is set for confrontation. The boy who once lived under his father's shadow is ready to defy him. And the girl who saved him is about to learn that her act of bravery will change not only Liam's life, but the course of the Whitmore legacy forever. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of the Montgomery estate, gilding the marble floors in gold. But unlike the cold silence that used to dominate the house, today it hummed with warmth. For the first time in years, laughter, genuine, unrestrained laughter, echoed through its halls. Nathaniel stood in the foyer, adjusting his tie before a grand mirror. He looked older than he had months ago, but there was a light in his eyes that had not been there in years. He turned as he heard the sound of quick footsteps. It was Ethan dashing down the staircase, his hair still messy from the morning. Dad, Clara's coming with us, right?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with excitement, Nathaniel smiled softly and nodded. Yes, son, she's coming. Just then, Clara appeared at the doorway, clutching her small worn backpack. She looked uncertain, almost fragile, as though she couldn't quite believe what was happening. The polished walls and gleaming chandeliers of the mansion still felt foreign to her. She had spent her life in the shadows of this estate, her father fixing its broken pipes and sweeping its dusty floors, while she remained invisible to the world of privilege. Now, here she was, standing at the heart of it all. Nathaniel approached her with gentle steps, his tone calm and deliberate. Clara, you've given me something no one else ever has. You gave me back my son, and in doing so, you gave me myself. I've realized wealth means nothing without people who make it worthwhile. He paused, his voice tightening. You and your father have been the soul of this place all along. I was just too blind to see it. The Clara lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushed. Mr. Montgomery, I didn't do it for anything in return. Ethan needed help and I just couldn't let him drown. But you did more than that, Nathaniel said, his voice cracking. You saved me from drowning too, drowning in pride, in loneliness. Ethan ran to Clara's side, grabbing her hand. Clara, you're family now. Right, Dad? The word family hung in the air like a sacred vow. Clara's lips trembled as tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, someone outside her father had spoken it and meant it. The three of them stepped out into the garden where Samuel, Clara's father, was waiting. His janitor's uniform was freshly pressed, but his hands were still rough and calloused, stained by years of hard labor. He stood nervously, unsure how to carry himself among the glitter of wealth. Nathaniel walked straight to him and extended his hand. Samuel, I owe you more than I can ever repay. But I want to start by saying this. Your daughter will never want for anything again. You both belong here, not as workers, but as part of our family. Samuel's weathered face softened, his eyes glistening. He shook Nathaniel's hand firmly. I never wanted riches, sir. All I ever wanted was for Clara to be seen to be valued. If you can promise me that, then you've already given us more than enough. Nathaniel nodded. I promise. That evening, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, the Montgomery estate glowed with a different kind of light. No longer was it just a monument of wealth. It was becoming a home. Clara sat beside Ethan on the garden bench, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, while Samuel and Nathaniel spoke quietly about the future. For once, the mansion was not haunted by emptiness. It was filled with something rarer, more precious than gold belonging. And though the world outside would still judge, still draw lines between rich and poor, inside these walls something had changed forever. Because the janitor's daughter had saved not just the millionaire's son, she had saved them all. Yet, as the stars began to appear, Clara glanced at the horizon with a secret she had never told anyone, one that could change everything again.
A wealthy millionaire thought his life was secure until the unthinkable happened. His only son nearly drowned in front of dozens of people, and not one of them moved. But then, out of the shadows, came the janitor's daughter. What she did that day would not only save his son's life, but also unravel secrets, ignite rivalries, and change the fate of two families forever. Stay with me. This story will break your heart and open your eyes.